Let me introduce Ruth Bomar.
Don't forget to give me timers.
Oh, that's right. Okay, thank you.
So why do we want to study the book of Ruth? Think about great stories. Like, what's your favorite movie? I think about Braveheart. Ah, right? I just say that word, you have all these images in your mind. Or what's the other one that Mel Gibson is in the Revolutionary War? What's that one called? Patriot. Can you see the pictures? I just say that word and you have all these pictures of Mel Gibson running through the forest, right? Killing all those bad guys. And so you just yell out at me. What's your favorite movie? What's a favorite compelling story or an author that you like to read? Colton. Tolkien. Okay. Who else? What's that? Larry McMurtry. Okay. Lonesome Dove. Any other stories? See Red River. So all of these great stories, like I think about Saving Private Ryan or Black Hawk Down. Oh, that gets you right here, right? And then recently Podark. The story of Podark and the disappointment and then the unlikely heroine of his, that the maidservant became his wife and his love. So these great stories, as humans, we make sense of life with stories. Stories help us understand what's happening around us. The stories that people tell us, our parents, our church, our teachers, our family, the stories that people tell us, and then the stories we tell ourselves. I have a good friend that every time her children have a birthday, she tells them their birth story. Story helps us find put a pin in the map. Just tells you where you stand, where you are in relationship to the world around you, and it helps you see life. And where you live and when you live and the people that live with you, around you, influence the way you think and the way you perceive life around you, your perspective. For example, if you were born and raised in, let's just say, Greenland, you would think and perceive life. You have different vocabulary and life experiences very differently than if you were born and raised in Brazil. Totally different life experience. Just the geography in Brazil is different. The language, the culture, the music, the song, the movement, how you react, the rhythm of life. So different. So why do we study the book of Ruth? It's a great story. And God uses stories to help us understand big truths. Truths that our brain has a hard time, it's not something that you can grab, like, here is a peanut cluster covered with chocolate. That's something you can hold and have and put in your mouth and chew and enjoy. But the big truths of the scripture, the truths that God wants us to know, they're like, we're like, what? We don't have words or categories or boxes to put those big ideas in. So he tells us a story. The story of Ruth is my favorite for many reasons, besides the fact that it's a great name. But every great story has a setting, has characters, and has a plot line. Now, the setting is when it happens, like when in time, where it happens, like where on the globe, and then what's happening socially, politically, economically, military-wise, all the things that are happening around you. Like our generation, we remember when JFK was shot. So it's like a pin in our memory. We remember where we were, what we were doing, how we watched it on TV. We remember the little boy saying like this. We remember those images. We remember where we were at 9/11. So because of what was happening around, and because of 9/11, we know now our life going through the airports is different. And a lot of us remember going to the airport and going all the way to the gate. Remember? So our lives have changed because of things that are happening socially, politically, economically, all of the stuff that happens around us when that story happens. Now, of course, characters, a good story has characters that you fall in love with, characters that you hate, characters that make you want to stand up and cheer. Like Stevie and I are watching this series, and we're yelling at our TV screen, "Don't do it! Don't get in the car! Don't kiss her back!" We're yelling at the character on the TV screen. And the characters become so real that I almost want to pray for them during my prayer time. That's a good story. Now, a story has a plot line. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has something called a denouement. The denouement means, it's a fancy French word. It means the conclusion and it, what the point was. The author of the story wants to tell us something, wants to tell the reader something, the audience something. Okay, so that's a little background on story. So to understand the story of Ruth, we gotta get on this airplane. Now, this is a very special airplane because it helps us travel. We get on it and we travel back, all the way back 3,000 years. Different time. Just like our grandchildren do not know how to answer the phone on the wall. If we traveled back 3,000 years, we wouldn't even know how to go to the bathroom. We wouldn't know where to go buy bread or where to buy shoes or where to get clothing. We wouldn't even know how to find safety for the night if we were travelers, because it's 3,000 years ago. So we as 21st century people, we don't have any vocabulary, categories to understand what life was like 3,000 years ago. So it's a time-traveling airplane. And then when we go back to this place, it's way on the other side of the world. So it's a different culture, different language, a different history, a different protocol of behavior. Stevie and I, we took this missionary, we helped take a group of kids, middle schoolers, on a missionary trip to Guadalajara. And because I was brown and I speak Spanish, it was my job to help the kids, these I guess, 13, 14-year-olds, little blonde, blue-eyed, red-haired, freckled girls and boys that had never been out of the country. Communicate to these boisterous middle schoolers how to behave when you walk down the streets in downtown Guadalajara. You don't walk in downtown Guadalajara the way you walk in the mall. You just don't. It's not safe. And I had to communicate that to these, and they didn't really understand. So that's the dilemma. That's a challenge that we have when we read the story of Ruth. We got to figure out what is acceptable behavior and non-acceptable behavior, why people think and act the way they think and act. So first thing we're going to learn before we land this airplane in this 3,000 years time travel and this totally different location is that we're entering a tribal society. We don't live in tribal society. A tribal society, the center is the family, and it's the Hebrew word is Bet-Ab, and it means the house of the father. And it's 3 generations. It's mom and dad, and then their grown-up sons and their wives and any unmarried offspring, and then the grandchildren. So it's 3 generations, about 20 people minimum live in the household of the father. That's the Bet-Ab. And that's the core. And then the clans would be, daddy's brothers, all of daddy's brothers, not his sisters, because his sisters went to another clan, but all of daddy's brothers. So all your uncles and all of their Bet-Ab. And then you have tribes, which are then would be all the grandpas, that would be like the 12 tribes of Israel. So this is a tribal society. There aren't any independent communes. You only live in the family. Outside of the family, you don't have any communication, any connection. Like, when we drive around here, we see FM 1486, FM 1488, FM 2498. And FM stands for farm to market. And somewhere in the wisdom of our bureaucracy of our country, they started building roads to carry all the farmers' produce from the farm all the way to market. That is a road to help the farmer sell his stuff so he can be in business. Well, without the family, it's like there's no FM roads. The family are the FM roads. Just to communicate, just to sell, to buy, to function in society. No family, you're not functioning in society. You have to live within your family. So what does it mean to live in a tribal society? Well, it's a patriarchal society. That means that it's male-dominated. The oldest living male is in charge. He's the patriarch. He's in charge of the safety of everyone in his Bet-Ab, in his household. And a good patriarch won't go to sleep until everybody is safe, protected, provided for, fed. He's a good patriarch. And so if someone in your Bet-Ab is in trouble, the patriarch is going to saddle the horses, round up the boys, and go get them. That's why Abraham went after Lot with his 300. And if you live in a patriarchal society, the only way for the land and the children are your only assets. There's no investment. There's no stocks and bonds. There's no mining, like mining for precious metals or gold. The land, the kids, the babies, the sons, not the daughters, the sons and the land are your only assets. So remember that song that is going on right now, the Buy Dirt? Have you heard that song? You got to look it up. Buy Dirt. It's a grandpa telling the wisdom to his son. It's a country Russian song, and saying, give her the ring, get on your knee, have some children, watch them grow up. You can't buy happiness, but you can buy dirt. Well, that's kind of what's happening right now in the patriarchal society. Without the land, you have nothing, because this is an agrarian society. You can't go buy any food at HEB. You have to grow your food. You can't go buy clothes at Target. You got to make your clothes. And making your food, I mean, like Kathy and Sparky, they grow their food, but they can't live on it. They don't live on their food they grow, because our society does not support it's not an agrarian society. But in this society, if you don't grow your food, you don't eat. So remember what happened in Jamestown in our history? They arrived on the New World, and they didn't have any food. They died in the first winter because they didn't grow any food. And so the Indians had to come and help them grow food so they would survive the next winter. But most of them died. And which is the one that they started eating one another? They became cannibalistic because there was no food. So an agrarian society is very basic. We got to eat. And so everything we do is about growing the food to eat. The family, the dad, the male patriarch, is the authority and the law. There are no police force. There is no army, standing army. The dad, the male, the oldest male, if he says whatever he says, you do it, because he's the law and he's the authority. And if you don't, then he calls your uncles and they get you in line. And if you don't get in line when your uncles come around, then they call the next level. And everybody stones the guy to death because he's not obeying the law. So, and the male, the patriarch is responsible. He's responsible for the well-being of the family. So everyone is working hard. Survival is uncertain. When you're in an agrarian society, you're dependent on the weather. And we live in Texas. You know the weather's not dependable. It's not a reliable character in the story. You know, and they don't have irrigation systems. They don't have a dam saving water for when there's drought. If it rains, good, our crops will grow. And if it doesn't rain, oh no, this is serious. Our crops will not grow. We will not eat. Family is everything. Everyone, in this society, everyone is barely making it. This is a subsistence society. You and I do not know a subsistence society. We have not existed in extreme poverty. We don't, simply because we were born in the US of A. But if we're going to understand the story of Ruth, we got to understand that the characters in this story are barely making it. So what are they thinking about? Food. They're thinking about protection. They're thinking about procreating, making the next generation. Because if we don't have sons, then we're going to get old, and who's going to feed us? We need the boys. We need the sons. And the sons, they don't have any other choice. They cannot say, hey, Dad, I'm going to go off and be a poet. Hey, Dad, I'm going to go off and go to the New World. I'm going to go to North America. They don't have that choice. Hey, Dad, I'm going to go and be a painter or an artist or something else. We don't have that choice. The boys grow up to take care of their wives and their children, and the boys grow up to take care of their mama. And so what does it mean to be a man in a patriarchal society? So the eldest son, he's the main heir, and the bulk of the responsibility belongs to him. So he's right next to Dad, learning the trade, learning how to be a farmer, learning all the things about being a farmer. And it's complicated. It's not easy to be a farmer. The bulk of the responsibility is going to be passed on to him, and the dad has to impart this to the son. So he takes it very seriously. The other sons might be apprenticed to other trades, like maybe the family needs a carpenter. So son number 2 might be apprenticed to learn how to do carpentry. And son number 3 might be apprenticed to learn another trade that is necessary for the family's survival, that would benefit the family. Everybody works. Nobody sits in the corner and reads a book. I would not survive in this society because I sit in the corner and I read books. Everyone works. The son, his job is to get married, get a wife, bring his honey to live in his father's household in the next room. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine bringing your brand new bride to Dad's house and moving in the next room? Well, that's what's happening. So his job is to do that and to have babies, have sons, because sons is the inheritance. Sons is a resource for the family. If Dad and the uncles go to war, you got to go to war. You, as a man, as a son, you have to follow Dad's orders all your life. And if Dad is not the eldest in the clan, then you have to follow your oldest uncle's orders. So you have to toe the line. Because if you don't, the family falls apart. We won't eat. The wild animals will come and eat up all the chickens. So the man must protect his wife, protect his children, and protect his mama. The son is the woman's Social Security. So what does it mean to be a woman in a tribal society, in an agrarian society? Well, first of all, she's a daughter. And she can't go off to college. Her only protection is her father and then her brothers. That's a weighted statement. And then she becomes a wife. So her only protection, her only provision, her only ability to interact politically, economically, socially with the world is through her husband. And then she's a mother. Now, as long as you're making babies, you are an asset to the family because we're producing sons. We need sons. We need to have lots of boys and work the fields and go to war and round up the animals and deal with the harsh elements. We need men. The men are the one who climb up the poles. What do you call the guys who climb the pole? The line workers, the linemen in the ice and in 110-degree weather. And when it's flooded and, we're wading through 10 inches of water because we've had so much rain lately. It's the men that keep us, the family, safe in the elements of the world, of life, of weather, of, grumpy neighbors. So if you're a mother and you're producing children, good, you're good. But then you become old and you're no longer producing children. What's your purpose? You can become disposable. You no longer are needed. And the only person that'll take care of you is your boy, your son. So the more boys you have, the more secure you are. So what happens to a woman without a father, a husband, or a son? Well, that's easy. She has 3 options: slavery, prostitution, or death. You have choices. But what does God think about the widow, the orphan, the poor, and the foreigner? Now, the word foreigner is a racial slur in the Hebrew language. And the foreigner is someone who has no blood ties to the land. They have no legal rights or very little legal rights. And they're not accepted in that society because, remember, they're not part of the family. So, but what does God think about if you're a widow or an orphan, then you're poor? So what does God think about it? Well, let's read some Bible. Deuteronomy. For the Lord your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords. He's the great God, the mighty and awesome God, who shows no partiality and cannot be bribed. He ensures that orphans and widows receive justice. He shows love to the foreigners living among you and gives them food and clothing. So how many people, when you have guests in your family, do you give them? We all give them food, right? Because of hospitality. But do we give them clothing? Jeremiah says, 49:11, I will protect the orphans who remain among you, your widows too, who can depend on me for help. What does God think about the widows, the orphans, the poor, and the foreigner? Psalm says, he's the father to the fatherless, the defender of the widows. This is God, whose dwelling is holy. Exodus says, you must not exploit a widow or an orphan. If you exploit them in any way, they will cry out to me, then I will certainly hear their cry, and my anger will blaze against you. I will kill you with a sword. Then your wives will be widows and children fatherless. Think about that. So what does God think about the widow, the orphan, the poor, and the foreigner? Deuteronomy. True justice must be given to foreigners living among you and to orphans. You must never accept a widow's garment as security for her debt. That's the only thing she's got of value. Don't take her garment. Always remember, you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from your slavery. That's why I've given you this command. Here it is. Here's Social Security. Here's Medicare. Here's Medicaid. Here's welfare. Here's WIC. Here's all the other food stamp things. When you are harvesting your crops, and forget to bring in a bundle of grain from your field, don't go back to get it. Leave it for the foreigners, the orphans, and the widows. Then the Lord your God will bless you in all you do. When you beat the olives from your olive trees, don't go over the boughs twice. Don't be thorough. Leave the remaining olives for the foreigners, the orphans, and the widows. What does God think about them? Isaiah says, what sorrow awaits the unjust judge who issues unfair laws. They deprive the poor of justice and deny the rights of the needy among my people. They prey on widows and take advantage of orphans. I mean, you're the scum of the earth if you take advantage of orphans and widows, you naughty person. Malachi, at that time I will put you on trial. I am eager to witness against sorcerers, adulterers, and liars. I will speak against those who cheat employees of their wages, cheaters. And who else is in this category? People who oppress the widow, who oppress the orphans, who deprive the foreigners living among you of justice. For these people do not fear me. Ow. So if you're not nice to the orphans and the widows and the foreigners and the poor, you're just as bad as those other bad guys. So this is the context of a great story that we're going to explore next week, the story of Ruth. And we're going to jump into characters in the last few minutes that I've got. Who are the characters in this story? Well, there's Elimelech. Elimelech makes me think of Elimelech. Elimelech means God is king. He's the husband. Husband. He's the man. He's the male. He's the oldest male. What's his job? He's got to feed the family. He's got to take care of the family. He's got to provide for the family. And then his wife is Naomi. Naomi means pleasant. So God is king, married a woman called Pleasant. And then they have two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. They have very unfortunate names. Mahlon means sickness, and Chilion means destruction. You know, that's not so strange. Does anybody know women called Dolores? Have you ever heard Dolores? It's a Spanish name. Dolores means pains. I have a cousin named Dolores. Why would we name our daughters Pains? I don't know, but it's not that unusual. Well, for example, I had a friend who named her son Cash. That's a nice name, Cash, right? So it's not unusual to give someone a name that means something. So for some reason, Mahlon and Chilion, their name is sickness and destruction. Now there's going to be, two daughters-in-law. One is Ruth. Her name is Friendship. The other one is Orpah. I forgot to put her up here, but her name means the back of her neck, the nape. That's what her name means. And then Boaz means strength. Now he's our hero. And, you know, one of the pillars of Solomon's temple was called Boaz. It means strength. Boaz is strength. And then Bethlehem means the house of bread. And, you know, I've seen pictures of Bethlehem. It's not green and luscious. It's not. It's more like, you know, think of West Texas. It's kind of dry patches of green every now and then. It's usually green if it rains and usually dry if it's not raining. So these are the characters that we're going to be introduced to next week. And I'm going to talk about, that's the end. Then we need to talk about this word Moab. Moab is, there's Bethlehem, house of bread, and then there's Moab. It's another location. Moab is like, do you guys know who Moab is? I can tell you, Moab, remember Lot? Okay, he was living in Sodom and Gomorrah, and then sulfur and fire falls down on them, and then they're leaving, and then Lot's wife turns around and says, oh, my house, I just got it all decorated with the colors I like. And she looks one more time, she turns to a pillar of salt. So now it's Lot and his two daughters, and they go hide somewhere in the mountains. And as far as those two daughters are concerned, it's the end of the world. There's no more men because it's all been destroyed with this terrible storm. And the only man alive is their dad. And they live in a patriarchal society. They live in a tribal society. These girls cannot go get a job. They can't go get a part-time job in Dollar Tree on the weekends to make ends meet. So they have an idea. Okay, what are we going to do to secure our future? I got an idea. Let's get Dad drunk, and then I'll go lay with him and get pregnant, and then you go lay with him and get pregnant. And they go, okay. So the first daughter gets a son by her dad, and his name is Moab. And the other daughter gets a son by her dad, and his name is Ammon. Moab and Ammon play big roles in the story of the Old Testament. And they've become Israel's enemies. So the Moabites, remember Balaam and the donkey? Well, he was a Moabite. And the King Balak, the Israelite people were traveling. They're going to cross the river, going into the promised land. And there's like, I don't know, bunches of Israelite people, just a truckload of Israelite people. And they tell the king of Moab, hey, let us come through. We've got money. We'll pay you. All we need is water and food. And the king of Balak says, no way, Jose. And in fact, he hires Balaam to curse him. And Balaam keeps trying to curse him, and he's unsuccessful. And then he had a conversation with his donkey. So that's the Moabite. And then right before they go into the promised land, the Moabite women come and seduce those good Jewish boys. Oh, those mamas and those papas in the Jewish homes, they do not like the Moabites. The Moabites are bad. So where does God is king and pleasant take their boys, sickness and destruction, to live for a little bit of time? To Moab, to the land of the enemies. Why would you do that, Elimelech? What are you thinking? But there goes Naomi. There goes those boys. Why? Because they live in a patriarchal society. If Dad decides to build a boat, then guess what you're doing? You're building a boat too. And if Dad says, okay, guys, we're moving into the boat, guess what you're doing? You got to go tell your honey, we got to move into that boat we just built with Dad and Mom. And the honey says, okay, there's no choice. You can't say, no. Let's let Dad go live on the boat, and you and I, let's go somewhere else. No, in a patriarchal society, if Dad is doing it, everybody's doing it. So Elimelech takes his family to Moab, and it is the land of the enemies. Why? Why would he do this? Well, the scripture says there's a famine in the land. This is an agrarian society. If it doesn't rain, the crops don't grow. You don't have irrigation. Year 1 of no rain, okay, we can squeak by. Year 2 of no rain, now we got to eat the seed. Year 3 of no rain, you're facing poverty, starvation. You and I don't know that. So Elimelech says, we got to eat. We got to eat. And it's not like when we come home from church and we open the refrigerator and say, we got to eat. What's in here? No, this is like there's nothing in the refrigerator, nothing in the pantry, nothing in H-E-B. All the supply lines have been cut off because it's a snowpocalypse, and and nobody's working because of COVID. There's no food nowhere because there's a hurricane. The shelves are empty. There's no food nowhere. We got to eat. So Elimelech takes his family and goes to Moab because there's a famine. That's not unusual. Abraham took his family and went to Egypt when there was a famine. Isaac took his family and went to Gerar when there was a famine. And Jacob and his 12 sons moved to Egypt when there was a famine, when there wasn't enough food. It's not unusual to go from one place to another place during times of famine. That's what's happening. And they're going to be foreigners in Moab. They're going to be foreigners in the land of their enemies. Foreigners don't have much legal rights, if any. They have no blood ties to the land, so they're nobodies. I don't know what kind of work Elimelech is going to find. For you to leave, you've got to believe that where you're going is better than what you're leaving. Ask any immigrant that have come from another country to the USA how hard that decision was. They had to believe that coming to the USA would be, anything that happens in the USA would be better than what's happening in my home country. Ouch. Well, that's where we leave our characters for today, and we'll pick it up next week. And the wonderful thing about the story is that it has a happy ending. It's a love story. It's the story where you think, oh, kiss the girl. Come on, kiss the girl. You're just waiting for him to kiss the girl and for her to be swept off her feet and then walk down the aisle and live happily ever after. That's what we want. That's what's being pulled out of us as the readers of this story. And that's where we're going to start next week.